Grid. Guess what? Today I've got Alex Jarbo from Asheville, North Carolina with me, and we're going to talk a little bit about real estate investing. What are we going to talk about today, Alex? Right? You tell me.
Vacation rentals, where the market currently is. We can talk about that buzzword that went around, the Airbnb bust, and where that came from and stuff like that.
Man, I'd love to unpack that. And just to give you some insight, we're new to the Airbnb game. I think we own 6 at the moment, and I love your approach. I was really excited to jump on today's call because I'm like, I'm going to learn a lot today, selfishly, and so is the network, right? The network's going to learn a lot. So, but before we get into that, tell us about you, man. I was doing some brief, investigation, and I saw you were a magician. And let's start there. How did that start?
Yeah, let's go beyond the military, before the military, then, which I rarely talk about. So my mom, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and I went to the school that my mom taught at. I went through like a K through 8, and the school was like right across the street. I was very introverted as a kid, and my mom saw that. I'm first generation American, but she saw that and was like, I'm gonna try to find something to sort of make him more just to put himself out there. And we both decided, she had we had tested a couple things, and I wasn't really much of a team sports person growing up, but I gravitated to magic. There was like a magic store that was like 30 minutes away from us, and like she would take me there for like free classes, and that just evolved like from when I was like 10 years old to 16, 17. 16, I decided to join the military, or like I wanted to join the military, and then when I turned 17, my parents had signed for me, but it always stuck with me. I used it in the military when there were just a whole bunch of downtime, which is really normal in the military, just deck of cards, coins, whatever. I mean, I did stage stuff even when I was like 13, 14, 15. And then it slowly it turned into like a networking thing where I rarely do real estate conferences anymore, but when I do, I probably do 2 or 3 a year now compared to when I was doing like 10. It just turns into a networking thing. Or like if some of my investors are local, we invite them over to the house all the time. We're in my house right now. And it just turns into like a little magic thing. And it's not just like little kid stuff. It's like real like street magic. And it's like I've been practicing it for close to 20 years now. It's crazy to say that.
That's so cool. It's like the for real street magic. You're like, how the hell?
Yeah, man.
What is that? That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that even in the military, so let's talk a little bit about that, right? Even in the military, it's just a way to break the ice with people, like right off the bat. People are like so intrigued by it, right?
Where I was stationed at, so I was a Marine Corps infantryman by trade, but I was stationed a part of 8th and I, the Marine Corps Honor Guard there, on 8th and I Street, part of the barracks there. And that experience is really unique because you're very close to your leaders, and like in terms of like your platoon commander, your company commanders, even your battalion commanders. That's not what I learned, was that's not normal outside of that unit. And so it would be like a nice like icebreaker sometimes where like we'd be all together and whatnot. I mean, I kept it a secret when I was the first couple years when I was in the military, because I didn't want to be known as that guy, a junior Marine. But as I progressed through leadership, leadership positions, it slowly started to come out and whatnot. So,
well, let me ask you a question. We'll go back, and I'm curious.
The magic episode.
Yeah, magic. I'm curious, but why did you decide to join the Marines? Like early on, 16. Like, why did you decide to join the Marines?
Yeah, it's another thing. I've probably done close to 60, 70 podcast episodes at this point. Never really asked me about that either. My parents are originally from northern Iraq, so there's a big Catholic population in that area, and some of my mom's siblings still lived there at the time, and they were actually I've actually never said this before. So they were actually kidnapped, and they were kidnapped by the forces up there, and then they were actually rescued by Marines. So I mean, my parents have always been, my parents have lived here for 30, 40 plus, my dad 40 years, my mom 30 years. And that was sort of what sparked that. And then it just slowly it slowly progressed through there. I mean, I don't regret my time in the military one bit. I mean, it taught me everything about leadership. It taught me I mean, I speak to my mentors to this day. I was around a really good group of guys, and taught me leadership, taught me how to deal with people in very, 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 very stressful scenarios. And that there is some things a part of military leadership that doesn't translate to the civilian world, but I would say 80-90% of it, like of just how to deal with people,
Mhm.
understanding that people are human no matter how much they mess up, is like that was part of it, and just operating in a high stress environment.
Well, I think it's important to always understand context of the entrepreneur because it helps unpack the direction that they end up taking their business in and the type of real estate investing business that they're building, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. Like you're in the military, you're in the Marines. What, 4 years, 5 years? How long?
Yeah, 4.5 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
4.5 years. And you decide to get out, right? You're gonna get out. And are you thinking I'm gonna go be a real estate investor straight off the bat, or like
No, not.
what was the
Yeah,
mental journey?
I'd say probably I had my bookshelf looked like 10% of what it was now, but at that time I was picking up like just general business books, stock books, watching a whole bunch of YouTube videos, the Bigger
Mhm.
Pockets books, which is full circle because I eventually started writing for them. But just started mainly with like just beginner real estate books. And I originally gravitated towards flipping, and I had joined a flipping mentorship when I was still in the Marine Corps. I joined it like my last year, my last like full year,
Mhm.
and the gentleman that was in charge of that mentorship had said that we were all doing like at the time it wasn't Zoom, StreamYard, anything. It was over like group coaching over the phone. You picked up a phone, dialed a number, and then you just like waited to ask a question. And the gentleman that was running that mentorship program had said that a lot of his long-term wealth along outside of flipping was tied into short-term rentals. And this was back in 2015, 16.
Early.
And yeah, so that really caught that really like perked my ears a little bit. And I was like, so I got on a one-on-one call with him, and I was like, hey, like I'm not really married to moving back to where I grew up. I'm really open to moving anywhere out like in terms of like a market. So he had told me we had like settled. It was like 2-3 weeks of talking, and we had settled on like two or three cities. At the time, I was engaged, now married, and I showed those cities to my wife, and she had decided on Asheville, North Carolina, which ended up being probably, in my opinion, one of the best markets to be in. But
Mhm.
I from day one of moving here in 2000, early 2017, was just vacation rentals in general. So I got my real estate license when I moved here. And I started I was a real estate agent for 2 years, just buying and selling. At that time, I was also looking for my own real estate investment. But at that time, at my budget, everything was either way out of my price range that was already built, or it was in my price range. But it wouldn't have done well as a short-term rental, vacation
Mhm.
rental. So my very first real estate investment was a ground up development, 800 square foot A-frame that we own to this day. One turned into two really quickly, two turned into four, brought on some investor capital from some friends, did some more deals, and then started teaming up with funds and different like larger syndicators to do larger deals. And now we're either purchasing, developing, or own like close to $40 million worth of vacation rentals just in this market alone. So we're
Just
looking to get into other markets outside of Asheville and next year.
interesting. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, man.
Um, how did you decide to do your first one being a ground up? Like, what was the mental exercise that you went through to be like, you know
Yeah,
what?
the mental exercise is like you don't know what you don't know. Like you don't. I go, oh, okay, it's 800. I would like just scroll through Instagram and stuff and like save pictures. I'm like, oh, A-frames look really cool compared to
Yeah.
like a normal cabin. Which is funny because we ended up building cabin communities after that. But I was like, yeah, I mean, like to me, like the size. There was two things that sort of determined where that A-frame event eventually got placed in the size of it. The size of it was just based off of my budget, what I could afford at that time. And then
Mhm.
same thing with the land. I naturally went outside of Asheville, like 15, 20 minutes away from downtown, just because I couldn't afford to be closer to the city.
Mhm.
Those two strategies though ended up playing to my advantage because once COVID happened, everyone left the cities, everyone left the downtowns and sort of went a little bit. I mean, national parks when they reopened saw record numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like people went into more rural setting. The trend now is that rural properties are doing better than the city properties. So yeah, that it just came out of necessity, but then it became the necessity. The strategy that was the necessity became the actual strategy of like developing these larger cabin communities, these larger properties.
Well, let's break down that first one. What did just out of curiosity,
Yeah,
what did the
absolutely.
land cost you? What did it cost you to build? What were you all into it for? What
Yeah.
do the numbers look like?
So I've always talked about the numbers, and I'll get to that in a second. I've never talked about the actual structure of the deal itself and
Mm-hmm.
how lucrative that ended up becoming.
Mm.
So it was 4 acres total, and it was 2 2-acre lots that were adjacent to each other, so they were attached to each other. The bank would only finance one side; they wouldn't finance both sides just because they were already separate. So the goal was to essentially get the one lot as complete appraisal to appraise for the purchase price, which is 45,000. We were able to do that, and the sellers were out of town. And this turned into a crazy strategy that we've used two other times. But we were able to write a contract for $1 at closing for that other piece of land because that other side did appraise for the purchase price. So at closing, we owned that other piece of land free and clear. So I wanted to say that before we got into the next one. So like 45 grand for the land. It was about 180,000 prior to COVID to develop that. So you're looking at what, 220-ish, 225, and probably another 15 grand to furnish it total. It was 800 square feet, so it's pretty small. So what are we looking at? 240 there total, all in out of my pocket with down payment and furnishing costs, because it was like a second home. At that time, you couldn't get vacation rental loans, so it was like a second home construction loan. That was it was just over 45 grand that I put out of my own pocket. It was only 10% down. So we're looking at 45 grand out of pocket. We've rented that thing out since 2017, and 2017. That property last year netted after debt service and expenses $53,000. So I mean, the cash on cash has been pretty crazy. Granted that was developed prior to COVID, so you're probably tagging on 30% to the cost now, 30-40% after things have like gone down a little bit. But you're like, I've said this before, that first one I'm not gonna say is an anomaly, but I mean, our cash on that's been over 100%. It's technically infinite at this point. And then that doesn't even include when property values exploded in our area, just like I feel like every other place during COVID. We then used that other we sat on the sidelines for a little bit. Then we took that land to a bank, used it as collateral to build 2 more A-frames right next to it, which are under construction right now. That's technically infinite there. It's just because we spent no money out of pocket there. And that's another 2 A-frames that are probably going to bring us close to 100 grand in net a year.
Why did you decide then, because you crushed it with this A-frame, right, to then go build tiny cabin communities? Like where did that transition happen?
One came from me being tapped out on just what I could do, like from a financial standpoint and my credit and everything. And how quickly I wanted to move. And then there were just friends and family, mainly friends, were just seeing. I mean, I would always post this stuff. Same thing with my wife. So they were seeing what we were doing, and first friend came, hey, I got 100 grand to invest it. Blah blah blah, and that's where that came. And then the bigger stuff came when I had joined. I coach for B&B Formula, which is one of the largest vacation rental, like short-term rental coaching programs in the world. And I give them a couple hours a week, but I saw some of the coaches in there. There's only 9 of us. Some of the coaches in there were doing these larger deals where they were essentially skirting short-term rental laws by doing the bigger stuff, by applying for hotel permits, by applying for these. In my county, they're called short-term rental complex permits, where it's like anything more than 2, you need to get this permit. It's not difficult to get, but it is a barrier to entry to get into it. And to me, that added value to the land if you had that permit on it, which we had a property that was caught in the middle of between last year and now, like of the whole interest rate thing that's still happening right now, where development costs and everything, like all the budget, the land was purchased cash. All the work was done up until getting the loan, and then obviously interest rates went from like our 5.5% all the way up to, it was an SBA loan, so all the way up to like 11.5 or 11.25. So it didn't make sense. So we had the short-term rental complex permit on it, and then we ended up selling it with that permit. And I mean, we doubled our money just on the land alone. So the reason why I decided to get into the bigger ones is with those types of permits, the county can't just come at you, the city can't just come at you and just be like, hey, you don't have this permit anymore. It protects the deal, especially when you're dealing with other people's money.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we'll have to dive into that a little bit. I don't know if we have that permit in our location.
But you have a short-term rental permit. Yeah.
We do have a short-term rental
Yeah.
permit. Yeah.
I mean, that protects it, especially for resale value and stuff like that. Like that's the first thing that someone's going to be asking about, especially with regulations and everything, if they're looking to purchase it.
Yeah, and in our area, it's pretty easy to get. You just got to go through the process. In fact, we've got the hearing on one of them tonight. It's the final one, so we'll see how it all goes. Should be fine. Okay, but it sounds like you scaled that up fairly quickly because you've bought a lot of real estate in a short amount of time. Started with this A-frame, then you started buying kind of these smaller cabins with friends and family. Like they would say, hey, and I'm curious how you structure that. Hey, I've got $100,000. If I come to you and say, hey, Alex, I've got $100,000. I want to partake in this. Like, how did you structure it? What did you do?
Yeah, it's again going back to I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was like, hey, just 50-50, no asset management fee, no. I had the management company at the time as well. And we could talk about how I transitioned out of that in a second. But when I first started, most of the value, which I still recommend doing to people who are just starting, when you're going to an investor, most of the value that I was bringing to the table is, hey, there's no management fee tied to this deal. When you're getting a loan, they will still tack on a management fee just in case they need to, like the bank's doing their due diligence. But yeah, it was just a flat 50-50. There was no preferred return on whatever. And my investors who were friends didn't even know what that meant. I didn't even know what that meant at the time. And so it was just a flat 50-50. They would put the money up. They would help me guarantee the loan, like I said, because I was tapped out on my finances. And then, so that was a big part of that for those first couple, for just two of them, just two friends that we built 4 cabins together. So those were 50-50. Then the next 7 were with a fund out of Michigan that it was someone that I did a podcast with. And I had just shown him the deal. I showed him that we got it under contract. It was priced way under of what it should be. It was underperforming, all that fun stuff. And that one was split a little bit differently, where it was 50-50 between limited partners, general partners, 8% preferred return, which is what we're offering in the fund that we're doing now. 8% preferred return, 50-50 split. I was still managing, but it's more like we brought a manager on where I'm like managing the manager. And I got 25% of the entire deal and 50% of the general partnership on these larger deals. Granted, I'm always flexible though. Like the bigger you scale your deals, where I'm not putting, the biggest question I get is, do you have any capital in these deals? Most of the bigger ones that I'm doing right now, I have zero. I've never put any of my own money with my partnership deals outside of due diligence costs that I'm refunded at closing. But yeah, that's how all of it's structured. For anyone who goes like bigger, if you're not contributing anything like me, like your equity position does tend to shrink, which is completely fine as long as the numbers still work.
Sure, yeah. For sure. And I want to delve into the raise that you're doing, because I'm curious about it, how you're structuring it and like what you're going after. But let's go back, because there's probably a lot of people listening to this saying, okay, well, I'd like to be able to, maybe they own 1 or 2, or in our case 6, right?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
And it's like, how do we then, a discussion I was having with my partners yesterday was like, how do we scale that, right? Like, there's some learning lessons when you buy number 1, number 2, number 3, right? There's some things that we've learned along that way. And by the way, we didn't start buying until the interest rates kind of spiked up,
which is fine, because if you can make it work at that interest rate, I've always said, imagine when they'll never be back to 2020, 2021. That's unrealistic. But when they stabilize, you're just going to do that much better if you refinance, or if you have an adjustable rate when it resets.
And that's what I'm just telling everybody. I'm like, hey, listen, if we could just hang on to these things, make a little bit of cash on them. Like, I'm telling you, over time, these rates are going to go down. We're going to refi back out of them. It's all going to be good, right? Plus, we're in the business of owning real estate long term. Like, we're buying whole people. But what we've learned, and I'll kind of share like some of the things that we've learned along the way, because I think it's helpful. And then I'd love for you to share some of the things that you've learned in the early stages and then what you're doing now. So Yes, we wanted to go into a market that had defined rules already so that there was a permit,
Yes,
right? That was
absolutely.
important. I feel that where where people got screwed was where there was nothing defined within an area or a county, and then the county comes in and says, "Hey," or the city says, "Hey, uh, these are the new rules," and people are screwed because there was nothing in place. So we like the idea that we're buying in Front Royal, Virginia, by the way, because I know you're kind of know the area. It's maybe about an hour outside of Reston, so it's very close. Reston is a like hub. Ashburn, Reston, a lot of tech up. So an hour away from where we live, beautiful country,
Yeah, but
beautiful
people,
scenery,
yeah,
right?
people still live out there and will still commute to work. I had so many friends that would do that. Yeah.
100%, 100%, right? So we like the fact that it's pretty easy to get a permit, right? Septic inspection can't be 100 yards from 100 feet from either
Next door.
side your neighbor,
Yeah.
right? That's it, right?
And
That's pretty much
that's
it.
scary. That's good. That scares some people too. I'm like, no, it's just it's a thing that you got to get, just like a plumbing permit or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
septic inspection, and they want to come in and look at the house, make sure that there's like it's not a safety hazard, but it's pretty simple, right? Easy to get. Um, the cleaning cost, that's an area that we realize that the cost of cleaning is pretty substantial, right? So we've set
Yeah.
up systems for that, but I think that was one of the areas that was surprising to me, and how in general, and I'm curious to hear maybe your numbers, about 45 to 50% of all revenue goes to operations cost, right, of that asset.
Yeah, and it used to be 30. It used to be 30, 35 is what I'm comfortable saying. We could talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's kind of like some of the things that I learned was the operating cost was higher than what I thought it would be, and we're trying to work on getting that down. I'm sure there's like economies of scale, and there's technology, and there's things that you could do to drive that number down. And just knowing going into an area that had defined permitting, um, made me feel comfortable in that process, right?
Yeah.
And but those are some things that I learned through that. Um, Curious what some of your early lessons
Yeah.
were.
Let's use let's use those six as a case study. So
Mm.
all six of them are in the same market.
All six are in the same market. Two of them are active. The other four are in different stages of becoming active. Like we're going to turn them
Yeah.
on in the next like month and a half to
Who's
2 months.
who's managing them? Like, do you guys have a separate manager, or are you guys doing it in house?
We're doing it in house. I own a business that has like multiple arms to it, and one of the arms is property management. And obviously, we segmented one of the people that we have and said, okay, you're going to become
Yeah.
the short term.
You are the short term rental. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you guys only on Airbnb, or are you guys on multi-channel?
Multi-channel now. We're using HostAway.
Yep. That's what I just came off of. Yep.
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 So we're using HostAway, multi-channel, VRBO, Expedia, Airbnb.
Yep. Okay. So yeah. So all of them. Yeah. So so this recently happened with me. So my cleaning costs, which is normal. I'm with the cleaning company that I used for 5+ years. Their rates went up 3 times in 18 months. And I had a general rule of thumb that I would tell students, which was, I don't like it when my cleaning fee is above what my 1 day average daily rate. So like a one night rate.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause there is a button now that you can toggle on Airbnb on the guest side, but like say like my rate was like $97 for like one of my older tiny cabins that we had purchased that we didn't build. $97, but the cleaning fee had gone up to like 130 or 127, whatever number. And I didn't like that, because when a guest wanted to book one night, which we do one nights depending on the rule sets that we have, because you have $97 plus 127 cleaning fee plus service cost plus occupancy tax, like that $97 a night just turned into $300, more
Mm-hmm.
than that probably. So I with how quick, like you said, with how quickly we grew and are continuing to grow, because we have 20 that we're about to close on in October, or at least 7 plus the development, and we'll talk about that in a second. There's 20 there, and then we're developing another 14. I realized that like where I need to be at in my business is the strategy and not the day-to-day stuff, because I was sort of the CEO of the management company, where I should be either probably the chairman, just looking in and just checking up
Mm-hmm.
on everyone.
Mhm.
So I had originally went to a manager that I spoke. I know all the managers in my area, the top 3-5 managers in my area for vacation rentals, and I went to one of them and I said, could I just, I know you have a laundromat, can I just tap into your cleaning team? And he had said no, but if you want to talk about your property, that was in visiting a friend in California when this email came through, and I was like, he said no, but if you want us to manage your properties in full, maintenance and blah 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 was tied in, and then we had negotiated the contract, like just feel free. So I started thinking, I was on vacation. It was like first vacation we had taken since COVID. And I was like, I was like really thought about it. I'm like, well, let me just hear him out. So he has access to other channels that most smaller managers don't. And based off of his projections were about like 50% more of what I was doing, which was covering his fee plus more. He had his own laundry. He has his own laundry facility. And then he has his own maintenance team that is tied into our costs. And we had not negotiated, but in the contract, it's like a 30-day notice to break the contract if it's not working out, say like 3 to 6 months from now, once everything is stabilized. Going on multi-channel is the first step, and you guys are already there. There are some channels you can't get on, like Marriott Bonvoy, which is pretty big. I think you need like 100 listings under you before they will allow you on that. But that's a massive barrier to entry that company is able to get on. The other side, outside of you not just delegating everything to a manager, is focusing on direct bookings. And I mean, I've
Yeah.
written entire articles on this.
Hmm.
Mark Simpson at Boostly, who's a really good friend of mine, I spoke to him this morning. He sort of headed the way. It's gone full circle with vacation rentals, and he sort of headed the way with the modern direct booking approach. Back in the day, direct bookings was the only way to book a vacation rental. Instead of before Airbnb, VRBO, online channels, you had to pick up a phone, call a mom and pop to book a vacation rental. So that's sort of gone full circle now with people, but now people are just focused on direct booking sites, whether you're building out one through a company like Boostly, or you're just tapping into one that's like a free one, and there's a couple free ones out there. When
Hmm.
it comes to bringing guests into that direct booking site, we use StayFi. We collect emails from the guests. There's nothing against terms of service for Airbnb, VRBO, any of the OTAs, the online travel agencies. There's nothing in their terms of service that I've seen that it's against their rules to like try to take them off the platform when they're initially trying to book with you. But when they come through, StayFi is like a little disk that plugs into the back of the router, and it creates a landing page for your internet. So like you can brand it whatever which way you want.
Hmm.
You're building it, and they just put their email address and their name, and that's it. And then boom, you get access to the internet. You don't have to worry about passwords or any of that. And you're building an email list while you're doing that. You're not just capturing the person's email address that has booked, but say like we have a property that's like 16 people. We're capturing all, I'd say 14 of those people's email addresses.
Hmm.
And then we're building an email list, and there's an integration with StayFi on the back end that's really cheap, that already has templates and everything that you can load that email list to. And we just blast seasonal emails. Hey, fall's coming up, which is our high season. Hey, when Thanksgiving, hey, Christmas, hey, January, blah, blah, blah. And we push them out like 2-3 months in advance going into the season. And that is where vacation rentals, in my opinion, are going. And I don't even like to say vacation rentals anymore. I like to say hospitality. It's just,
Hmm.
especially with the bigger players. Like, I mean, depending on what type of property you have, like booking.com, you can get on, which is where the hotels are at. If you have a micro resort type property, like the cabin community that we have, like
Hmm.
you can, or one of the cabin communities we have, you can put that on Expedia, because it counts as like a micro resort, like a hotel.
Hmm.
Expedia opens you up to like 15 different platforms, because they own VRBO, they own hotels.com, I think they own TripAdvisor. But that multi-channel going beyond Airbnb, VRBO is really important. And then directbooking.com. I know that was a pretty 10-minute explanation on that, but
No, it's great.
that's where we focused on, and building, just with any other business, building that email list and controlling the guest. Think of Airbnb, VRBO as the Facebook and YouTube for a business. Like if I'm trying to sell this water bottle over here on my desk, you run ads to create an email list, and then you remarket to that email list through your own email, text message, whatever. It's the same idea, except you're collecting emails from people who are coming from the OTAs, the online travel agencies.
Makes
Yeah.
complete sense, right? That you've got to control your own data, right?
Yeah.
You can't be at the mercy of the platform. You got to build a list. The bigger your
And how
list.
that's crazy powerful when it comes to reselling the business. That
Hmm.
we've purchased from a couple mom and pops that, hey, I have an email list of 3,500 previous guests, that there was no value attached to that list. It just came with the property. I'm like,
Hmm.
this is a gold mine in itself. The social media channel that has, say, 3,000-4,000 followers, that's 3,000-4,000 people on technically an email list. Like that, those are like undervalued things that aren't really tied into. I hate to say it, but we're closed on these properties. It's like that are tied into these properties.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
When you are going direct to consumer, are you building out, let's say, an Instagram page per property, or are you doing it under an umbrella, right?
It's both.
It's
Yeah,
both.
it's
You're
both.
doing both.
The umbrella. So our company's Open Atlas. We haven't done it outside of the logo and the website. We haven't done anything for that yet. That
Hmm.
we just incorporated that because that's mainly for the investors to see what we're doing.
Hmm.
But that's going to have its own Instagram right now. So like our A-frame, and like we have like the two cabins and whatnot, like with the smaller investors, those don't have any type of social media. Those are just sold on the online travel agencies. Now when it comes to our cabin community and the one that we're closing on, I mean, we're going all in on social media there, where they
Sure.
have individual accounts because they are completely different. But then there's going to be an umbrella above all that. So like the way we have it, a big thing that was a big thing negotiating with the property manager too that we brought on was I want, on top of separate social media channels, they also have separate direct booking sites that are tied into their property management software,
Hmm.
because outside of just, like I said, separate Instagram channels, it was also important to me to have separate direct booking sites, because I look at that. I always think of the exit in mind, even though we are long-term holds. That is a business asset to have that direct booking like site on top of the its own Instagram channel and whatnot.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an asset, right? It's an
Yeah.
asset, especially if you can nail the whole PPC or social game driving straight, doing direct bookings. I mean, you just got to
Yeah.
kind of figure it out. Well, that leads me to the question of what target occupancy are you shooting for then?
Yeah.
Because
So you hear some, and I'm guilty of this as of like the last 6 months, of like, I always like to, like, through COVID, through interest rates, through whatever, it's like I was always proud to say like we were like 95% or whatever. And then you start talking to like multifamily investors or multifamily syndicators or people who are doing larger stuff, or like there's a couple like when I first started in this game, in the hospitality game, I was reading like hotel textbooks,
Mhm.
like like looking up like universities, like hospitality, like textbooks, and purchasing them from Amazon and whatnot. They hotels usually operate at that like 65-70% mark. I'd say vacation rentals is a little bit higher than that, probably closer to that 80-85% mark, depending on how big the property is.
Mhm.
And I learned very quickly that like being at like a 95-98% occupancy is good, but it's not technically a good thing. It means that you're underpriced.
You're underpriced.
So
Yeah.
I like to be in that, and my manager knows this as well. I've learned a lot from him. Like being in that 80-85% range is sort of like that sweet spot where you have your average daily rate optimized and then your occupancy optimized. So your RevPAR, you have your RevPAR optimized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. When we got into this, I turned to everybody and said, "You realize we're going in the hotel business?
You're
Like we
going to
don't
the
own,
hospitality and
yeah,
hotel business.
yeah, yeah. This isn't like we own a vacation rental. Like if you
Yeah.
build a portfolio of properties like this, you're in the hospitality
Yeah.
industry.
You own a hotel that's scattered throughout the city.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And that's how you have to look at it. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about all the negative news and press that came out. Right? Like, what's your take? What's your opinion? You know, when you
Yeah,
started reading that, what were you thinking?
so I've written 10 articles for Bigger Pockets that have been read by over 500,000 people. Where the hashtag Airbnb bust came from was actually, I'm pretty sure it came from Bigger Pockets, because I remember that article. Like the back end editing team was like pushing it and like, hey, if you guys want to write anything similar to this. I've never been doom and gloom type of writer if you read any of the stuff I've written there. But I'm pretty sure it came from one of my peers, which nothing against her. I just feel like with how big, one, the United States is very big. Vacation rental market is global. I don't like putting blanket statements on anything.
Sure, everything's
And
local.
yeah, so like when you look at air, like a big thing is like Air DNA data, like which is the main aggregator of vacation rental data. That can be very misleading, especially if you don't know what you're looking at. Especially like, I mean, especially now people are switching from like Airbnb VRBO, which is what AirDNA mainly does. It doesn't track like direct bookings. It doesn't track the other like online travel agencies outside of Booking.com. I don't know if it does Booking.com because I haven't used it in a while. But that data can be very, very misleading. And I feel like a lot of people got into vacation rentals in 2020, 2021, say even 2019 prior to COVID, where it was pretty normal to just get any type of property, roof over your head, whatever, and just throw it on Airbnb and it do well. I have a feeling that, not I have a feeling, I've seen the numbers. I feel like without you underwriting the property correctly, those days are done where you're just taking a property and just throwing it on Airbnb and it just doing well. It might work like if you're in the right market without you knowing what you're doing. But I felt like there was a massive buzz. So like when you look at inventory numbers being at like a record high, they're starting to drop now. Like I get email responders from my agent all the time. And I'm like, I guarantee that was a vacation rental and it's hitting the market right now because they didn't know what they were doing. So you have to treat it like a business. We talked about email lists. We talked about controlling the guest, being on multi-channel. Airbnb, VRBO are just marketing channels. That's what I look at. That it's where the eyeballs are at. That's where you want to be at. Same thing like I compared to Facebook and YouTube ads or Google ads. That is where I feel like a lot of people are sort of getting caught up with the data. It was like people who didn't know what the heck they were doing. They had the money to invest, but they didn't know how to run a proper business. So you need to be going into this knowing like, okay, like doing a business plan, even though it's like gut wrenching. It's like, what are the distribution channels, which is probably the most important thing to start with. And then just underwriting the property correctly. Just treat it like a business and you should be fine. Here's the thing about like, I was too young to invest in 2008 and 9. So I got like coming out of the military, I was obsessed of understanding like just markets, like how market cycles work, what attributed to 2008 and 9. You never hear about the people who did really, really well in 2008 and 9, like the real estate investors. Because I've met a lot of investors that were like, yeah, I went into a city in 2006 and purchased 10 properties off of these bull crap like loans, but they had actually done their underwriting and had a general idea of like, hey, this is actually going to do well. I compare that to what happened with like what's happening now with like vacation rentals of like back then people just purchased a property. Hey, it's always going to appreciate. It's always going to do well. And it's the same thing with like, hey, I'm just purchasing this property, put it on Airbnb. It's just going to do well. Compared to people who actually like underwrote the properties. Cause I guarantee I've met hundreds of hosts in the last year that are like, no, we're doing completely fine. It's just we're hearing about like the doom and gloom stories. Yeah.
Well, I was one of those guys that in 2008, I bought a lot of things at 50% off and I still own them today.
You still own them?
I still own them. Yeah. I still, I was like the single smartest thing I've ever done. And I'm, that's why I'm a big proponent of just buy stuff and hold it. Cause even then prices came back, right? But we bought them at such low prices. And I go back.
Yeah, but if you get on social media and you're like, I didn't lose anything, I did phenomenal. You're gonna be looked at as the bad guy. People don't want to hear like outside of your network. People don't want to hear that like, hey, I did so well when everyone was losing everything.
I do have a couple dogs. I did a video the other day. I was like, I've got one that I just shut the building down because it's cheaper for me to shut it down than to actually put tenants into it. So tell me a little bit about the capital raise that you're doing right now, right? Like it sounds like you're doing something big.
Yeah, we're doing a really big one. So we have a treehouse community that we're purchasing in my market. In my opinion, it is the best hospitality vacation rental opportunity investment in the country. I mean, every single person I've taken up there down to like I've stayed at every single one of the properties so far, like personally, just to create my own checklists and whatnot when we take over. It's like ordering Uber Eats or whatever. Even those people who are driving up there are like, this is incredible. But we're doing a $9.25 million raise right now for this community. We have owner financing secured, no bank involved for the remainder of the purchase price. But yeah, I mean, we've been working on this deal since February. It's like I've cleared my calendar completely just to that was also part of moving into bringing on a separate manager to handle the day-to-day, was just to focus on this deal. But yeah, it's one of the most picturesque properties, period. It's gone viral like 30 times on social media.
How many treehouse
Yeah,
properties are there?
There's 7 there currently, and their average daily rates are anywhere between like 380 to 500, and we think we can do even better than that with going multi-channel and all the strategies that we just spoke about. And then there's another 13 that are being built. 7 of them will be built by the end of this year. They're already dried in and they're already framed. Development will be finished up by the current owners, so we're not taking over the development. They're handling all those costs. And so that it was a fun negotiation for like 6 months with that. And we have owner financing secured, but our mortgage payments are suspended until everything is fully built, which is pretty nuts too.
That's cool.
So there's 7 currently, another 13, and then it's also a wedding venue. We own a wedding venue in this market already that I would say is mid-tier. This is more high tier. So that was a completely different business model that I learned this year, which was event planning and weddings and how to delegate that, how to handle that, how to generate leads for that. That we're going to be putting those systems and processes into this one.
Has it been worth it? Not worth it?
For the weddings and events?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been worth it. I will say that if you are purchasing, even if you're purchasing like depending on when the high season is for weddings here, it's like obviously summer and fall. But if you're purchasing in whatever month you're purchasing in that year, just be prepared to not really see any weddings until the next year.
Sure.
Even if you have 6-8 months in advance, say if you're purchasing in February, I would still, our original strategy going into it was like, we're going all in on weddings, but you have to block your calendar out on a certain way with that. Like the wedding venue is next to 7 cabins. So it's a balancing act between vacation rentals and weddings. We originally went all in on weddings, and so we'd block our calendar out only like 3 months in advance, like only open it up 3 months, and that really hurt us, especially for our larger property that's on the larger unit that's on the property. So we flip-flopped a little bit, where now we're focused on like the vacation rental side, but we know that wedding leads are booking for next year.
For next year. Interesting. Yeah, we bought this 26 acres. That's now 32 acres, which is an interesting story, but it was 26 acres that had one house on it on the Shenandoah River. Beautiful. And the idea was, originally was like, okay, it's zoned agricultural, like we'll renovate the main house, make it look awesome, and then use the rest of the land potentially for either glamping, cabins, possible wedding venue, because you look at what's allowed, right? Like what's allowed within agricultural zoning. And what was interesting was, we went to the county, and the county is like, we're down with glamping sites, we're down with potential cabins at some point, but the wedding venue, because you're not off of a main state road, because you're down kind of like it's 26 acres, but it's not down right off of a main state road, the overlay doesn't allow for a wedding venue, right? Which, I'm sure if we pushed the point, we probably could, right?
What's the price? What's the price of the penalty?
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
$500. You're like, cool, that's a permit.
Well, actually, that's a good point. Like, I don't know. We need to look into that, right?
Don't do that. No.
I'm gonna look into that.
We are live. No.
So anyhow, what's cool though is that that one property should be up and running here shortly, and then we're going to create like a little community. And one of the ideas that we had, Alex, was the reason why I brought it up was a treehouse community, which they would totally be down for doing. 8, 9, 10. I mean, how many acres are on your?
17.
17. Yeah. So we're thinking 26 acres. It's actually now 32 acres. You could build a lot of cool tree houses out there, right?
Yeah. And what I love about the treehouse model, or just like the unique properties is what we focused on, going forward, is that those unique properties sell themselves on social media, where Mark Simpson from Boostly, I've mentioned him a couple times, has said it, where your guest becomes your influencer, where like they're posting it on their social media and it's going viral and whatnot. I mean, two of these properties in particular in this community, one of them's had like 40 million views total on TikTok across other people. And then on YouTube, it's been like millions, which is very difficult to do. And yeah, it's just, it plays into that. But what I've learned about the treehouse idea is, with labor costs going up, with materials costs never going back to where they were prior to COVID, the best, and it goes back to that first A-frame, the best use of your space and your square footage is to make that property as unique as possible and optimize every single square foot. Most of these tree houses, most of these unique properties that we're purchasing in this community, I think the biggest one is 600 square feet, maybe 650 top, 600. But they bring in a ridiculous number. Average day, like their cash flows are like at least 100 grand a year. And putting those houses on stilts, like some of those houses are on stilts, but when you're building a house on stilts that you want to call a treehouse, because I see this all the time, people will just build 4 piers and just call it a treehouse. You want to, and I have a couple floor plans behind me that they are tree houses where we're designing right now. Where if you're designing a treehouse, if you're designing a unique property, especially on stilts, you want to put some thought and design, and your engineer is going to push back on you because obviously it needs to be structurally sound. You want to focus on the design of the foundation, how the stilts actually look on top of just the property itself, or it just looks like a box in the sky.
Yeah, I built this. It was interesting. There's this guy in our area that built a luxury tree house in his, like, he owns some acreage, and he kills it. He killed it, right?
Yeah.
And somehow I found him online, and I was like, I want a little tree house, but I don't want like a luxury. Like, I just want a little tree house for my house, right? And it was so cool how he designed it, right? It's like there's the 2 trees, like the deck, the trees go through the deck. You've got two stilts, right? Plus the trees, actually the other support part.
In
looking
the deck.
on the deck, looking onto the river. It's badass. And he's like, I made it strong enough so that at one point, if you ever just want to like build a tree house on top of this, we can, right?
I love it.
Like a hardcore tree house. Right now, it's just, kind of a primitive tree house. I'll have to send it to you so you can look at it.
Yeah.
But our idea was to obviously do that within the 26 acres. But here's the big question for you: are yours all like septic, water? Like, are you using
all of our properties were septic and sewer. All of our properties are, I will say, all of our properties have wired internet, like hardwired internet, where they have capabilities of going to a gig. But this community that we're purchasing is like 10 minutes away from downtown, and it has city sewer, like city water, city sewer, which is nuts. And I mean, I've done podcasts and live streams to the students from up there, so the internet was completely fine. It wasn't wired internet the way our other properties are, but I mean, we could stream on StreamYard just like this with the students, and it was perfectly fine with me working up there. Usually it's going to be septic and sewer based off of, or septic and well based off of just being in a more rural area, which is the like just what those properties, like what we just talked about, turn into with being a little bit away from the city. But yeah, I mean, most all of our properties are the septic and the well outside of this one, which makes it unique. So this one almost breaks every single rule I've ever taught about, because it's one of those things I talked about. I don't like putting blankets on anything, but you're always advised for the most part to not invest in an HOA. And this property is baked into the HOA. It cannot be voted out of the HOA. And it's also in a gated community, which is really cool for the guest. I always like to think of the guest experience, not just at the property, just like the drive to and from the property. The fact that you have to put a gate code in to go into the property.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It lends to the experience. But yeah, it's like it lives in an HOA. It's tucked away from the neighbors, where it's not like bothering the neighbors. But yeah, it's in an HOA. It's got indefinite conditional use zoning, which is something that we keep telling our investors that's very, very important, because we're getting the property well above replacement value, but you cannot replace that property in this market anymore, because the city that lives in, which is 10 minutes away from Asheville, has completely banned short-term rentals, even with permits. So they can't take that permit away whatsoever. Yeah.
Valuable, super
Very
valuable.
Yeah.
Super valuable. Well, what does it cost? Last question on this. What does it cost to build one of those tree houses?
Yeah, I would put it, and this is going to sound like a lot because we've developed at 180, 200 a square foot prior to COVID, probably closer to 250, 300 after COVID. I would double that number at like the 500 to 600 square foot. Most of the cost is going to go into your foundation. It's going to go into your engineering costs. It's going to go into your concrete. It's going to go into, if you're doing steel for foundation, I would say 50% of your cost is your foundation, and that's what attributes to that higher price foot, like cost per foot. But if you say it's 500 a square foot, and I'll do the numbers real quick, and it's what's 500 times 500? Yeah, so like if you're building a 500 square foot, which is the rough size of all those, and it's at 500 square foot, which is about 200, 250, double of what we're building for normal right now. A $250,000 house plus the land, say 50 to 75 plus furnishings, another 15, 20. If you're in maximum, if you're in the property for 350,000 and it's netting anywhere between 60 to $100,000 a year, you're solid. And that's in this market. That's in this interest environment in this market. It's one of the few types of structures, the smaller structures. If you make them unique, you can go get a 12% hard money loan and still cash flow.
Yeah, interesting. Well, so let's pivot very quickly and talk about psychology on this, right? And then meaning you've scaled this up fairly quickly. And a lot of people would have just been comfortable doing kind of like these onesie twosies, right? Like, oh, I'm going to go in. I know how to do an A-frame. I'm comfortable. But you've decided that you're going to go after a $9.2 million project, right? Where did that come from?
That one wasn't in the goal sheet or the vision board or anything. So we closed on the 7, and that was a pretty stressful closing, especially with understanding how to run a wedding venue, which we had never done before.
And when you say we, who's we?
My wife and I, and then just my entire team, just like my management team, my cleaning company, my assistants and whatnot, and my maintenance people. So I was like, you know what? I was 16 properties plus the other 14 that we're developing. I was like, I'm good right now. We'll be at 30 in this market, whatever. And I told my agent's phenomenal in this area. We're good friends with her too. And I was like, hey, Cicely and I, my wife and I have decided that we're done at least for the next 6 months just to stabilize everything. I was like, but if it's this property, which is that community, because I'd always had my eyes on it, and I just never thought it was even going to be an option. I was like, if it's this property, I do want to look at it. So my wife and I decided, blah, 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 had that conversation with the agent, stop sending me stuff because I would want to jump on it. And like 2 days later, she brings me this property, and she's like, hey, it's off market. They're not interested in selling right now, but they're willing to hear whatever your proposal. I was like, I don't even have a proposal right now. And I was like, so then I had to go back to the wife and be like, hey, I know we just talked 2 days ago and done. I was like, she never comes with any listing appointments. I was like, just come up with me. Like, just come up, check it out. And she just absolutely fell in love with it. I was like, cool. That's going to be harder than the owner financing piece. And so she's on board. And then that's where that came from. So yeah, I mean, outside of the day-to-day management of like toilets and broken hot tubs and, hey, the internet just went out, I don't enjoy that. Designing these properties, focusing on the social media strategies, just sitting down and understanding what I really like to do in my business. I truly love what I do. I have 2 floor plans behind me that I was just working on before we hopped on. That's where that comes from. It's like the money piece, the cash flow for the most part after it's stable. Like most of our properties are stabilized at this point. Most of the investors are happy at this point. And when I say most, I'm not gonna say like all of them are. We're still stabilizing some of our properties. So like, as long as they're taken care of, like I'm just focused on what I enjoy. So that the answer to that question is the next step is probably even doing a bigger thing of this is like if I can find the investor for it. It's just I enjoy putting these properties together, these unique experiences. One of the biggest things we focus on going into like a new neighborhood is like we door knock the neighbors. We go, hey, like we just purchased the property. We're developing this, blah, blah, blah. If some of the neighbors don't like it, okay, cool. At least I introduced myself. At least we're doing everything down to a T with the permits. But outside of that, like I truly enjoy developing and finding these properties. I enjoy putting the deal together. That's what I love doing. Yeah.
You also just, I would imagine, completing the vision of what it looks like, because you have to have a vision of what it can be. You're like an artist, which is what I love.
Yeah, and
right?
I will give credit to the owners of this current treehouse community because that is 100% their vision. Like they've given me some reign, like, hey, what do you think of this floor plan? And I'm just like, hey, whatever you guys want to do, like this is your vision. I'm like like I said, they never even had plans on selling, so it's like them executing their vision and finishing out by them. That's why I didn't want to take over the construction either, because it's like trying to step foot in the middle of everything they've been working on for the 5 years. but yeah, no, it's really rewarding to be like like I almost cussed there. I was like crap, like
It's all good.
yeah, it was like we're the like this like is done, especially coming after COVID. Like there was a lot of stuff that was put on pause during COVID where we just acquired properties instead of developing. We
Mm-hmm.
acquired properties with room for future development that we're working on now. But yeah, I mean, not even developing, just getting a deal across the table and just getting it to closing and be like, that's why it's like really important to like read up mentors, whatever communities like the one you built, like just bouncing ideas off people, because there's thousands of different ways to put a deal together and you don't know what you don't know. Like, like, oh, I didn't know like it was normal to like charge a small acquisition fee. I thought it was just like or I don't even know what a preferred return is, like I said. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like um outside, yeah, it's very rewarding outside of development, just to get a deal across the table that you put together.
Alex, I
Yeah.
think that's awesome. I think that's awesome. If people wanted to learn more about your fund, about what you're doing, where can they go? What can they?
Yeah, so you guys can connect with me on LinkedIn, just Alex Jarbo. We built an entire website just for this deal itself, that
Mm.
you guys can visit, and that's openatlas.investments. If it's
Open
not live,
Atlas dot.
are we live right now?
No.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we can cut that out. But openatlas.investments is the website for that. Yeah.
Openatlas.investments. Yeah, and it's fine. We'll have people like edit this, but it's just getting people to the source to take a look at it. Because one, I want to look at the tree houses. Like, I don't know if
Yeah,
I've
I can send
I
it to you. We got like the best videographers, best drone people that I flew out to the property to do. We got our drone guy Danny, who's phenomenal. They stayed at the property. He like consults with like DJI, like with their like FPV drones and stuff. So it's 4 days for like 15 minutes of video, but it was like 4 days straight of filming. That just like solidified like how cool that property was, just like filming all like the content that we did up there.
That's just
Yeah.
amazing. And it's one of those things where it's not only an asset, a physical asset, but it is an asset also for your media business, right? Because at the core of what you are, right, you are a marketer, and
Yeah, man.
this will bring you more deals, and this is part of your media play, and it adds to your portfolio, which helps with raising capital. I mean,
I
it's a business.
It's funny that you said media. So I showed this deal to one of my mentors who's not in real estate at all. He has his own social media company, like management firm. And I was showing him the numbers on like what it was doing on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram. And he's like, what's the ad revenue from that? And I'm like, I have no idea. I was like, that's not in my pro formas. That's in nothing. I was like, that is just the cherry on top if we get any revenue from that. Yeah.
Yeah. Eventually, I mean, people love to look at this. My wife
Yeah.
is constantly sending me pins on like the different ideas and different Airbnbs, and so it will evolve into something a lot more, and I'm looking forward to seeing that evolve, Alex.
Yeah, and
So
it's like it's a really cool time if you want to do it yourself or to invest. It's a really cool time to do it because like the interest rates have not like stable, or not the interest rates, the cap rates are still a little bit out of whack with like mom and pop owners.
mhm.
I compare it to like where self storage or mobile home parks were like 10 years ago, where like you can still get these things for like in that 10 to 13% cap, and if you hold on to them for 5 to 7 years, I mean, this is coming from my appraiser who's done some of the top properties in this country. Like they're going to stabilize in that 6 to 8, 5 to 8% cap rate. So you're already
Mhm.
purchasing or developing with equity built in.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, we're going to make sure that we put down all of your info below
Yeah, man.
so that everybody in the community can learn a little bit more about what you're doing. And I'm looking forward to seeing you continue to grow your portfolio. This has been enlightening for me. I know it's the same thing for everybody in the Grid Network. So thanks for sharing your time today, Alex. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, man. It's fun.
Sure thing.